Not that I'm going to be looking for a collection or anything like that. We already had that this morning, so you're all set. Would you all, thank you and welcome to the 2012 Milton Candidates Forum. Would you all join me, flags in the back of the room, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Just a few ground rules. Town property. No smoking in the building. Smoke outside if you want. Ladies and men's rooms are over here. Kitchen's there if you need a. There's some water up here, but if you need a water break or check makeup or whatever, kitchen's over there. The format that I was planning on using was just basically starting from the top of the ballot and going down. The format that we've used in the past, that seems to work well, is each candidate gets about a 2-minute opening statement. Then we'd like questions, if they can be pre-written, and you can get the cards up to me. That's the best way, because then I get to use the mic and read them in. If not, then yes, you can ask them from the floor. After all the questions for that particular race, we'll give each candidate a 2-minute closing statement, and then we move on to the next race. Neither Barack Obama or Mitt Romney called me to confirm that they'd be here today, but I wasn't really surprised. Nor did I saw Maggie Hassan on TV earlier today, so I know she's busy. And Ovid, I don't have his phone number. So those races are not up for. We don't have candidates for them today. Same situation with Carol Shea Porter, Frank Ginta, and Brendan Kelly for the third party. We're going to start with the race for state senator, and I would welcome, or ask you to welcome to the front, Mr. Jeffrey Ballard and Mr. Jeb Bradley. With that, I'll put the mic in the middle, and they're both getting their waters ready. You both take a cue from Mr. Ryan, how to use water effectively in a debate. All right. Mr. Bradley, you can go first, and what I'll do is alternate from Republican and Democrat side as to who starts first, second, 2 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. Really a pleasure and an honor to be here this afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeb Bradley, and I live in Wolfboro. It's been an honor to have served not only you in the state Senate for the last 4 years, but in other capacities before that. And I look forward to continuing the work that I've tried to do in the state Senate. And briefly, let me just touch on what my priorities are. I think jobs is what is on everybody's mind. And in order to grow jobs, New Hampshire has to be competitive. We have among the highest business taxes in the country. I don't think that we can sustain those high rates. So as the economy improves, assuming it does, and as we are able to meet our obligations, I think that we should be looking at lowering over time those very high business taxes. We need to tackle high health care costs, something that I've done over the last couple of years by introducing more competitors into the market as we, over a 3-year period of time, eliminate the Certificate of Need Board. Legislation that I've sponsored to improve our tort system, to establish a voluntary early offer system. And lastly, my top priority, really going back into the legislature and the state Senate, hopefully, will be a long-term solution for education funding. We need to give certainty to communities so that they can budget. We need to get rid of the donor town status that has been so divisive. And quite frankly, I think at the end of the day, we need a constitutional amendment that will allow us to target aid to the communities that need it the most. Unfortunately, in New Hampshire right now, that is not the case, and you see great disparities in funding. Towns that should be getting more state funding are not, and communities that have a very high income level are getting more state funding than, at least in my view, they should. To me, a long-term solution on education funding, growing the economy, lowering healthcare costs, those are our top priorities. That's what I'll work for if you allow me to continue to represent you. It's been an honor, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Senator Bradley, thank you for being here again today and for giving us a chance to continue this discussion. My name is Jeff Fowler. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I live in Brookfield, just next town up and over, with my wife Stephanie and my son Tyler. What got me interested in running for the state senate is seeing the everyday impact that the state senate and the state legislature has on all of our lives. I think I'm going to make the argument tonight that I think you'll be able to agree with, that because of my background, my skill sets, and my life situation, that I'll be best able to represent you in Concord. I work as an emergency department nurse, so I certainly understand the healthcare aspect, and I've seen firsthand the damage that some of the cuts that came out of Concord in the last budget cycle have caused. I have a son in public education, and I wish to keep him in public education and strengthen that system rather than go to some lengths to take away from it that we'll highlight tonight, I'm sure. My wife and I have recently started a small business that we're growing. We understand what it takes. We understand how the New Hampshire advantage of having low taxes has helped us to start our business. But I think something that differs between my opponent and I don't believe that the New Hampshire advantage is just having no income tax and no sales tax. The New Hampshire advantage also has to be a very strong public education system, and it has to be a very healthy, educated workforce. And I'll highlight tonight how I think some of the steps taken by the last legislature have really started to chip away at that. So what I will bring to you if you elect me as your state senator is a little bit broader view of what's going on and understanding the impact of every vote. With that being said, I'd like to ask all candidates if we can keep it brief today so we can all be home by halftime for the Patriots game. That'd be great. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Questions that are being turned in? Thank you. Flying fast and furious. First question. Stand up so I can project better over the audience. Would you support legislation to ban gestation cages in New Hampshire? And can someone fill me in on what a gestation cage is? Mr. Ballard?
I guess someone would have to explain, because I'll say I am naive to what a gestation cage is. So. Can I read it? You want to?
I believe that what the questioner is referring to is a cage that contains a farm animal at the part of birth. Is the questioner here who asked that? Is that the...
During the whole pregnancy of the sow, she is kept in a cage where she cannot move, she cannot turn around, she cannot do anything other than be in that position.
Well, my good friend, former Representative Johnson, is well known in Concord as somebody who is a animal rights advocate. And as I have always tried to do, I always listen to both sides of the debate. I would want to listen to the Farm Bureau, I'd want to listen to animal rights advocates. It's not an issue that I'm particularly well versed in, so I look forward to talking with you and talking to other people that I'm presuming on the other side of the issue.
Thank you.
And for the sake of brevity, I think I'm going to say pretty much echo Senator Bradley's thoughts on that. It doesn't sound like a very good idea. I know I grew up on a dairy farm in Vermont, and we had various different animals, and I know that free range is the best way to go, but I would be open to listening to both sides and seeing what the supposed benefits to it are, and if it outweighs, the perceived cruelty. So I'd be open to have that discussion.
All right, the next question is, someone, again, will have to fully explain this one to me. Views on CARC 26, legislative oversight on judicial branch. Senator Grant.
That's a great question. This came up in Wolfboro the other day. We had a chance to have a forum on Thursday evening, and myself and the fellow Democrats that were there speaking see this as an overreach, as a power grab, and an encroachment on the separation of powers between your judicial, legislative, and executive branch. The reply was, well, this is just dealing with, some administrative rules and some funding stuff, so it's not really a power grab. Well, you know that if you don't agree with somebody, you could certainly make up a lot of rules that would make their lives a lot more difficult. So there's definitely the potential for abuse with this constitutional amendment, and I would urge you to vote no. I can't say that that was ever the intention, but it sets up an unnecessary risk of legislative abuse towards the judicial system.
I think, first of all, let's try to explain what this constitutional amendment does. It says that if there's a conflict between the administrative rules of the court and statutes that are in law, that the statutes will apply in that circumstance on the administration of the courts. And that would be a proposal for the Constitution, and if it receives 2/3, it would have the effect of going into law. I think that while there are definitely two sides to this situation, I hope that people realize, and I'm not sure that they have, but the Supreme Court justices in New Hampshire today have supported that compromise language. The original version of it was far stronger. It would have, I think, done some of the things that Mr. Ballard had spoken of, but the compromise language that says, for instance, if you are a plaintiff or if you want to defend yourself in court, should it be the administrative rules of the court that say you can or can't defend yourself in court? There are times that the legislature has to weigh in on these subjects, and so when there is a conflict, and that's what it is, in these administrative rules, not the decisions, trust me, not the decisions, but just on these rules, like for instance whether somebody can defend him or herself, then the statute would take precedent over the administrative rules. So we will see what all of us do as voters. I don't think the world will end if it passes, nor will it change that much of it if it doesn't pass.
Next question. What is your opinion concerning school vouchers, especially considering that vouchers will allow people to send their children to private or religious schools? Mr. Fowler?
The school voucher program, as it was set up, will basically allow me to send my son to a private school on your dime. That's the bottom line of the voucher. What happens is, and I assume we're speaking to the one that just passed, that if a company decides it's going to have a scholarship for a student to attend either a public or a religious institution, that they will be able to take a tax credit in $3,500 to pay for that student to go to the private or religious institution. Now, how do you end up paying for my son to go to private school? It's because if you live in that community that my son is being taken out of that school, that community is also going to lose the $3,500 from the state, which means local taxpayers have to make it up. I don't think I should be asking you to pay for my son to go to school at a private institution, and I don't think it's right to put that burden on the taxpayers.
Well, thank you. I don't think there will be a burden on the taxpayers because the small number of students that will be eligible to apply for this scholarship, and it's very different than a voucher, they will be taken out of the school, and so to a certain extent at least the costs of whatever that school district has will be reduced. Now, this may be eligible for 1,100, 1,200 students statewide. It's targeted toward middle and lower income students, and quite frankly, I think that as parents are looking at school systems, for the vast majority of our youngsters, the public school system does a great job in New Hampshire. Now, I have 4 kids. Not every kid functions perfectly in the public school system. So the purpose behind this law is to give, in particular, lower and middle income level parents somewhat greater opportunities to go to a school of their choice, whether it be a charter school, another public school, or a private school, through this scholarship program that businesses would willingly contribute to. I think that given the need for excellence in education, and given the need that every child is different in their learning capabilities, we should give a program like this that's very innovative a chance to work. If it doesn't work, then we can come back and either fix it or eliminate it. But to say right off the bat, when I think most people know that all kids learn differently, and the public schools, while they may work for 95% of our students, they can't work. Nothing can work for everybody. So more options, I think it's a good idea. We should try it.
Thank you. I have to keep us on schedule because I was just looking at the amount of time we've used so far, so I have to stay with the questions that we have to date and move on. For Mr. Ballard, how do you expect to facilitate the last 2 advantages if your efforts to jeopardize the first 2? I think it has to do with your opening statement.
Well, again, the New Hampshire Advantage, the no income tax, no sales tax, having a healthy, educated workforce, that breeds stability. I spoke about this the other day. Stability will breed growth. As we grow our economy, revenues will grow without ever touching, without ever having to open a new source of revenue. And so as we keep a healthy workforce in place and an educated workforce in place, New Hampshire is going to be more attractive to businesses which wish to relocate here. Again, New Hampshire has always had very high business taxes. I'm certainly in favor of lowering them when it's responsible and when it's prudent. But with that being said, even with high taxes, companies have come here. Businesses have grown in New Hampshire. Why? Because we have a healthy, educated workforce. If you have a more productive workforce, you're naturally going to make more profits, regardless of what your tax rate is. So of course, I'm open to lowering those revenues as the economy, or the rates as the economy grows. But you can't just expect to cut education, cut healthcare, and think that anyone's going to want to come to New Hampshire.
I think the issue that Mr. Ballard raises is the 2011 budget and how that compared to the 2009 budget. When we took over, and by we I mean Republicans became in the majority, we faced on a going forward basis an $800 million structural deficit. We had to make some very difficult choices, some choices that, quite frankly, if we had had more revenue, we would not have had to have made. But we did because, like working families and small businesses around our state who have tightened their belt, state government also had to tighten its belt. And let's remember that in the previous 4 years, there had been an increase in almost 100 taxes and fees. I'm sure people remember the LLC tax. It was dropped in to the budget without even the courtesy of a public hearing. It was a jobs-killing tax on business owners. There was something called reasonable compensation, which basically was an income tax on business owners. In order to make New Hampshire more competitive, I led the fight to repeal the LLC tax and fix the reasonable compensation issue, because small business is the backbone of our economy. And you know, it's interesting to note that Governor Lynch just a few days ago claimed credit for a balanced budget with a very small surplus, because unlike our colleagues before us who overinflated revenue expectations, who tried to take money out of a fund for doctors, who tried to sell state assets, who borrowed for operating expenses, we made the tough choices. And I think as Foster's Daily Democrat editorialized just recently, we made the responsible choices. We balanced the budget with tough cuts, but without smoke and mirrors. And these are the types of things that small businesses and working families have had to do. State government had to do it. I hope that revenue improves. It probably will to a certain extent, and perhaps if it does, we're going to be able to restore some of those dollars to the university system, for instance, or to healthcare providers. But given the $800 million budget deficit we faced, and given the nearly 100 tax and fees that have been increased, we had to make some adjustments, which we did.
Can I have a 30-second rebuttal? I'll keep it very brief.
In the closing statement.
Okay.
All right. Like I said, I got to keep it moving along. Question: do you support expanded gambling?
I have never supported expanded gambling. I think that there are a number of issues that concern me. The social issues of broken homes, that goes without saying. Getting addicted to an uncertain revenue source concerns me. Not having a regulatory structure in place, which is something that led Governor Lynch to say that he would veto any expanded gambling. So I'm very skeptical about gambling. That being said, I'm certainly going to take an open-minded approach to any proposals that come forward. However, for the state to award a no-bid contract to any kind of gambling entity without the proper oversight and without the scrutiny of a competitive bid process, there's no way I can support that.
I think I agree with a lot of what the senator said. My view on expanded gambling would be that it would have to be a resort-type destination-type casino somewhere in the vicinity north of Route 2, north of Route 302, and preferably on the eastern side of the state. So it would utilize, a lot of the traffic would utilize Route 16 and the Route 16 corridor, which would benefit a lot of District 3. But with that being said, what's been talked about most is electronic gaming, electronic slots. If you've ever been to one of those game rooms, there's a new one down in Newport, Rhode Island. It's one of the most depressing, just sad places. And that's not what I want people to think of when they think of New Hampshire. So certainly under any aspect like that, I would be 100% opposed to it. But something that could be an asset to the North Country, I would certainly consider.
At this time, to keep moving with our agenda, I'd ask each candidate to have take a final 2-minute closing statement.
I want to use part of my closing statement to go back to the budget issue, and I'm sure a lot of other candidates, especially the state rep candidates, will speak to this tonight. Every single state legislature in New Hampshire has balanced the budget. Every single state legislature in New Hampshire has been better than the one before it. Senator Bradley was there for the 2009 session, and the Democratic budget that he speaks poorly of actually returned a higher surplus than the budget that we were talking about that we just learned about. It was a $17 million surplus on this Democratic budget. So when you listen to these numbers, you have to think smoke and mirrors. What are we really talking about? An $800 million deficit? There was no deficit because budgets aren't carried over from year to year. Each budget is its own entity, its own animal. It's balanced every single year. To get through the economic recession of the fall of 2008, there was one-time stimulus funds that the Democrats used to balance their budget. That's not, if you receive a bonus at work and it's a one-time bonus, you're not thinking that you have a deficit the next month because you didn't receive that bonus again the very next month. The Democrats took that money knowing it was a one-time stimulus. That doesn't carry over into a deficit. So these numbers that you're hearing are kind of smoke and mirrors. If you elect me, I will go to Concord and I will think about the effects of every single one of my votes. I won't cut funds for mental health when I know that it's just going to trickle down to the local economy, that crime rates are going to go up, We've certainly seen violent crime rates go up since this last budget was passed. We've seen police officers having to shoot mentally unstable patients all over the state. I had a friend that I was deployed to Afghanistan with who was involved in one of those very unfortunate situations where a mentally unstable woman had lost her access to mental health and she ended up being shot and killed by the police. You have to think about what is going to happen when you make your votes in Concord. If you cut funds for a program, the need doesn't go away. The need is still there. Someone is still going to have to pay for it. And all that this last budget has done is push costs down on the local economies. And that just hurts us, especially in rural areas like Carroll County, District 3 on the southern end of Stratford County, that don't have the ability to rebound as well as some of our more populous areas. So I ask for your vote, and I thank you for your support.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for organizing this forum this afternoon. Thank you for letting me, as well as Jeff, get to the Jets game and the Patriots game. I'm obviously a Patriots fan. Let's just go back to the budget for just a moment. What we were faced with is an $800 million gap in how we were going to put together a budget. That was real. It was unfortunate, but it was real. And it forced the types of decisions that we made that working families and small businesses around our state are doing. Had we inflated revenue, borrowed for operating expenses, continued to try to sell state property, continued to try to raid a doctor's fund, all of which happened by my friends on the other side of the aisle when we were in the minority, we would have had a huge problem, and we would be trying to figure out how we would dig out of that problem. We made those tough decisions. I think that's probably the biggest difference between myself and my opponent. I will make those tough decisions to protect taxpayers. I will ask if we can afford it, how we're going to pay for it, and how we are going to do it and keep ensuring that New Hampshire is competitive in terms of job growth. We've got to prevent an income tax or a sales tax. You can depend on me for a long-term record. When I say it, I mean it. And I'm not going to vote for budgets that will spend us to the verge of an income tax. So jobs are my top priority, lowering health care costs a top priority, and an education funding solution that works for all of New Hampshire, another top priority. I've been a leader in the state Senate in terms of pension reform, but other things that are very bipartisan. I was just honored as Legislator of the Year for my legislation that helps curtail the abuse of legal prescription drugs by people that shouldn't be having access to them. I've been twice named Citizen of the Year by the New Hampshire Veterans of Foreign Wars for the work I did when I was in Washington to help veterans health care. I think a lot of you remember that I worked with a congressional delegation to save 5,000 jobs at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. I bring that kind of bipartisan approach to solving problems, and I ask you to allow me to continue to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin.